Welcome to the Affirming Village podcast, where we center neurodivergent voices, affirm diverse ways of being, and empower families, educators, and advocates with knowledge that truly honors the whole learner. We're your co-hosts, Dr. Destiny Huff, a late diagnosed autistic ADHD mental health therapist and non-attorney special education advocate, and Lisa Baskin-Wright, an ADHD and dyslexic educator and IEP coach. Together, we dig into conversations about neuroaffirming practices, special education, and disability rights. Please remember, nothing shared on this podcast is medical or legal advice, and the views shared here by the host and the guest are their personal opinions. This space is for educational purposes only, to help you feel informed, empowered, and never alone in the village.
Welcome back to the Affirming Village podcast. After our last episode, where we talked about summer not always feeling like a break, we wanted to talk about one of the places this shows up the most, and that is with family and community gatherings.
Yes, because sometimes the hard part is not just supporting your child's sensory, communication, executive functioning, or regulation needs. Sometimes the hard part is managing the adults who misunderstand those needs.
Yeah, the adult who thinks the child not saying hello is disrespectful, or that needing headphones means they're being difficult.
Or that leaving the room means they're being rude. Or that not eating the food means they're spoiled. So let's get into it. I definitely think every family dynamic in tackling this and boundaries is very different. I think I've kind of talked, throughout the episodes about how, and everyone who meets me knows, like with my demeanor, like you can get on board or you can get gone. Like that's who I am as a person. Like it just is what it is. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I don't want anyone to ever think that that does not mean there are not situations where I am super aware of like how my children might be perceived, about how my parenting might be perceived. Some things that might even be tied to their disability, like it's in the other people's eyes, that I'm like, no, that's not tied to their disability, that's just them being 8, and they actually know better, right? So it's like,
Right.
and so then you can get the opposite too sometimes, where people are looking at you like, why would you like correct your child like that when you know they have a disability, right? Which comes to like not presuming competence. But the point is, it's so layered. And I think that after we talked about kind of how the summer can maybe not be a period of rest or relaxation, um, that's why we really felt, that next piece is kind of tackling, okay, let's say you are having those interactions and those engagements. How do you tackle boundaries with others? And I feel like a lot of times you end up having to tackle boundaries not with strangers, um, as much as it is like family and friends.
Oh, yeah. No, this is such a tricky topic, right? Um, and I think it looks really different. Every situation is completely unique. Um, but I think this is something that parents of neurodivergent and disabled humans like grapple with. I think it's a very real thing that we all experience. Um, And I think that it can look a million different ways, right? It can look like that lack of presuming competence or ableism. It can look like, I mean, it's not necessarily different than an IEP table. Like some of the same stuff can kind of come up, right? Like the gaslighting, right? Like the reassurance that lands as total judgment, right? Like, um, what do I say? What do I not say? How does defending what's happening violate my child's privacy? Why, that inner dialogue of like, why the hell do I need to explain or defend myself, right? Like
Mhm.
it can just lift up a million different things and be very different from kind of family member to family member or friend to friend, right? Like we had some experiences with, I'm using air quotes, friends that are no longer friends. Like people
Yeah.
say people say some things and you're like, huh? did you really think that that was something you could say? Like, okay, well, thank you for telling me who you are. I'll be leaving now with my child.
That part. And I mean, and I think like with any dynamics in relationships, like, and I see people say this all the time, like you lose friends just from having a child sometimes, right? Like you have a kid and friendships change and shift, and there's not that maybe that understanding or just that connection anymore because like I don't have kids and you have kids and now that looks different for you. But then you add that layer of that neurodivergence and disability. And sometimes I always say like I had to shift how I thought I would be as a parent. I had to shift how I viewed parenting. Um, because again, I was gonna say like as a millennial, right? Very different upbringing. Like you don't get to speak your mind. Like you don't get to speak your mind. Like there's not like you can disagree, but you do that in silence internally to yourself.
Try being a Gen Xer.
Right, right. And I
What
know, and
parent? What
that's what my
parent?
friends that are Gen Xers will say. They're like, don't even disagree internally. Like, if they think you're disagreeing internally, then that's going to be an issue, right? So
Right. If they even
it's
know
like
where you are, if they've even let you in the house.
that part. Like, when the street light comes on, come back. Like, and I was a millennial,
Right.
so my parents like knew where I was, but they were also were like, go play. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, I say I'm going here. They're like, okay, like they want to keep us close, but at the same time, they were like, please get out my house. Like, go do, right? And so I think that, there's those different parenting styles and techniques, but also the way in which we talk to our children, the way we allow our children to talk to us, the considerations that we make. And I always like to preference and let it be known, like, I think that my parents were good parents, right? It's like, it's not
Yeah,
about like that piece. It's just about, I always say this, and I've always said this as a mental health professional, each generation does something a little different, right? So I
totally.
feel like it went from being, I'm putting a roof over your head and food in your stomach, you're fine, to like, okay, maybe like, let's let you do things you enjoy, to like, maybe let's have some conversations about certain things, or let you know you can at least come to me, to like, how am I doing as a parent? Like, am I doing good? Like, it's like each evolution added a layer of like, really what you feel like maybe wasn't there or you didn't see. You learn more,
Right.
you do more, you change. And I was like, and my kids will do the same thing. They'll do something with their kids if they have them that they felt like it would have been nice to have this, right? And so I think that, but that all comes into play when you get around family and those different dynamics and those different upbringings, and even being in the same family, you still have where like this person's raising their kid this way, this person's raising their kid this way, like, and so when you bring them together you often see those boundaries come to play because are we family, and so you're allowed to get onto my kid. Do you understand how I parent my kid? Like, do you feel like I'm too soft on my kid, and so you feel
Right.
they need to go overboard, or do you feel like I'm not soft enough, and so you're like they could do whatever they want, and I'm like, no, you don't understand, right? So I think all of that comes into play, and that really plays a part in the boundaries you set and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably too close to my parents. Um, so, there's so much blessing in that. Like, I really do feel like I can say whatever to my parents. And, that I think that goes both ways, honestly. And so I certainly am not going to say it was like smooth sailing all the way through because that's like not real. Um, but I have a dynamic with my folks where like we would have conversations where she, like my mom in particular, um, would say like, I just want to be their grandmother. I don't want to have to be the right, and it's this like tricky dynamic because um when my son was tiny, we lived like walking distance from my folks. And then we moved further away, but my mother was very worried that like he wouldn't know who she was, right? Like, so we saw them a lot. We're not that far. We're about an hour or so from them. And then when my daughter was born, my mom thought, well, I didn't have that time with her that I had with with my grandson and, all the things, um, which they're very close with my children. And so, my daughter in particular, I couldn't bring babysitters into the house. I couldn't send her to a daycare, right? These things weren't accessible for her. So the kind of childcare help I got, the respite I got was my folks. And so you're asking for help, you're not paying for that help. They're not going to do things exactly the way that you want them to do. Um, and in hindsight, because my children are 20 and 23, right? Like I'm sure, a different perspective and calmer, more gracious, nuanced perspective than I did when they were tiny and I cared more about keeping things sort of as they needed to be, so to speak. Not that there isn't legitimacy there, it's just a different season of life. But, my mom is absolutely an undiagnosed ADHDer. I love her. She is all over the map, right? So half the time you say something to her, her brain's doing something else. She didn't catch, she didn't, right? Like she renames everything. Right? Like she's just kind of a whirling dervish. She's hilarious, but she's like kind of all over the place. And my daughter, who needed kind of more predictability and struggled to be able to communicate like what was troublesome for her, right? In some ways, that relationship with my mom allowed for my daughter to become a little bit more flexible, right? And to just be like, that's Grammy is Grammy. She's darn good at it, right? Like, and my mom is I mean, she's probably unique in this way. My mom is very good at getting feedback. Like, she can be called out and she's like, yeah, I totally blew that one now, didn't I? Right? Like, I guess, ma'am. Um, but the dynamic gets a little trickier depending, I think, on your relationship with the person at play. And I do think that I have a unique relationship with my parents, that allows for that. But I see it. I see this, like, folks talk about this, right? Especially in the friend space,
Mhm.
like that is tricky.
Yeah, and I think, that, and I, so many thoughts, like you said, so many thoughts in there at the same time. One in that, like, my parents, I'm very close to my parents too. And they definitely raised me and my sister to be, my parents were young. My mom had me when she was 18. And my dad was 2021. And so I grew up with them. And then my sister came 4 years later. And they were away from family. We were in Germany. My dad was military. So we would see our grandparents and our cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff on during the summer when we came home every 3 years. And so, we adapted and all those things. But I think it also definitely created that closer dynamic between the four of us.
Sure.
And so they raised me and my sister to like speak our mind and all those things. And so I think when I had kids, they very much were of the, we're not going to tell you and Nate had a parent. We're just gonna, you tell us what you want us to do. We will every now and then say, my dad's favorite line is, y'all do what you want to do. But I'm, basically, and we always know that's his way of making, like, I'm making a suggestion based on like my years of life experience.
Right.
It's
Do
just a
with it as you
suggestion.
will.
Yeah, like, do with it what you will. I'm not trying to tell y'all what to do. Like, they're very good about that. And so, um, when my children got their diagnoses, it was the same thing. They were very much just like, what do you need from us? And it was an adjustment because of how we were raised. And so we were raised to speak our mind and things like that. But I always say my parents are very like, we will comfort you and then let's find a solution and let's do that solution. There wasn't a whole lot of like, we're processing it, we're talking it through, it's more like, I am gonna give you a hug and a kiss. I'm gonna listen to you say it all out. Okay, now let's solve it. Right.
Right.
And so that, when you look at neurodivergence, right, doesn't always help depending on your neurotype, right? Because like you are still trying to figure out what the solution could be yourself. So you may not always have that, right? And 100% have had this conversation with my parents many times. They are absolutely neurodivergent. My mother is absolutely ADHD. Um, and so, and my dad is absolutely OCD or OCPD, and they know this, and I've said this, and I stand 10 toes down on it, and they know this. And so, but because of that, it was interesting to see the ways in which they would later talk about how they had accommodated themselves,
Right.
and how then seeing that with my children. So my parents will take them places, and my dad is very structured, and he's like this, he'll ask me and my husband like, hey, do you guys have any plans? We'd like to take him to do this. And he's got a whole thing and the whole itinerary, and it's all that. And my mom is like, forgot everything inside. She's going out, she's in the car and has everything and needs him to go back in the house to get the thing she forgot because she doesn't have it. And it's like, and my kids are really funny because they've become very much like, that's Oma, that's Opa. Like they just know this. And so, but I
Right.
think it has come to the kind of dynamic me and Native created of like, we can have those honest conversations, say those things out loud. Like, and that does allow them to be more flexible. And so I think in turn, when you bring that in the friend aspect, right? I have seen, and again, I've always said I think this is my autism. I've always been selective when it comes to friendships. And that I've had people that, and I said this all the time, that'll say that I'm their friend and I don't feel like we are friends. And that for me is like the level at which we talk about things, we share things. It's not how often we communicate. Because I have a best friend, like we will go months
Sure.
and then we will talk and we pick back up right where we left off. And so it's not about like, oh, we have to talk every day all the time. It's just more so like, what do I feel comfortable sharing with you and things like that. And
Right.
so I think that that selectivity, which is why, side note for all of my parents with autistics, that's why I get it when our autistic learners say they don't have friends, because sometimes those peers can feel like they're friends, but they don't feel that connection.
Yeah, that's
And
really powerful.
yeah, and so they're like, that's why. So when my son would be like, I don't have friends, I'd be like, oh, I get it. I said, you feel like they're acquaintances or they're classmates. And he'd be like, yes. And so I get that completely. So just want to throw this as a side note because I know a lot of parents hear that from their autistic learners, and I'm like, that's probably why. Now, sometimes it is, there is not that connection being built at all, but a
Right.
lot of times you'll see where like the teachers, and you'll even observe them like engaging with kids, and it's like, but they don't feel like they're their friends. They just feel like we're engaging, we're
Right. We're in
coexisting.
class together or
Yeah.
whatever.
And so with friendships, I have never had where I had to be like, oh, like we're not going to be able to go back over here, or we're not going to be able to hang out together. Um, but I have had interactions in the more like we're at the park or something, and maybe my child is playing with another child, but the parents' response to it has kind of made me go, oh, we won't be like exchanging numbers. You know what I mean? Like we're not
Right.
out outside of this setting,
And you're out.
even though your kid and my kid get along very well. And I've also had times because my kids have gone to daycare their whole lives, like, since they were 6 weeks old. Um, and because again, the daycares they were in, they have these things, they have plans, like once you do find out your learner has a disability and the support and stuff. So it's a little different on that military side, but where they are really good friends. And then I will go to maybe like add the parent on Facebook and see some things that I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, I'm glad that your kid is still a kid. And so that's not being fed to them, or they're not reading into it, or they're not understanding it, which, like, I guess kudos to you for that separation. But, like, no, I definitely am not adding you as a friend. I definitely wouldn't want my kid to go to your house because the things that I'm seeing, I'm like, oh no. So I've had that happen where I've had to like, my kid has been like, oh, I want to hang out with them outside of care and outside of like a birthday party or something with an invitation. I'm like, I would not take you to their house. Like I don't tell my kid that, but I would think, and it's because social media does give us that access to see
Right.
like
You're like, note to self.
insight into people. And I'm just like, oh yeah, no, you're only gonna be friends at that's gonna be your best friend at daycare,
Right.
not
I have
going
a question for you, just because we do have an age difference and I'm curious.
to.
So, one of the things that's always been super hard for me, and because of the work I do and the folks I interact with so much online are younger than me and have children who are younger than mine, right? We're sort of raising our kids in different seasons, really, right? Um, One of the things that was always very, very, very hard for me, and I notice it every time I'm around a parent of a disabled or neurodivergent learner who's my age, is there's almost like, I don't have the right words for it, but it's almost like trauma comparing, right? Where it's like, whose life is harder, whose kid is, right? Like a lot of sort of analysis and scrutiny, right? Like my daughter was always called the unicorn, right? Like, or well, she can this, so you could, right? Like where it almost becomes like a competition and it feels somewhat similar to some of the dynamic with family, but it's like, um, and I'm curious, because I think I spoke about this on a reel, maybe. I think it was on a reel on Instagram. I don't know. I was probably talking to myself in the shower. Um, when my kids were really young, like for context, I joined Instagram in 2018, I think, 2018, 2019, 2018, something like that. So my kids were like 15 and 13 because it was around this time of year. So my was he 16? I can't keep track of it. 15 and yeah, like 15 and 13, 15 and 12, 15 and 12. Um and at that um I I didn't join for this purpose and I like wasn't really connecting with folks in that way. Like I joined because a girlfriend of mine posted some pictures of us and she's like, "Oh, did you see them?" And I was like, "No. Am I missing something?" And she's like, "I did it on Instagram." And I was like, "The hell's Instagram?" So I joined so that like I could see the pictures that she posted, right? Like it wasn't with this and Facebook I didn't post anything on, certainly not related to what we were dealing with schools and all that kind of stuff, because I was terrified of retribution. So folks like weren't necessarily talking and connecting, and there certainly was not talk around like neurodiversity affirming and like all the pieces of like meaningful inclusion and representation and multiple right like we just were not having these kinds of conversations in the same way. Do you feel like because you're in those spaces, your children are elementary age, do you feel like folks are kind of doing that comparison game because it was pervasive in kind of my generation of parenting?
Oh yeah, I think it definitely moved from just that interaction physically, right, in person to virtually, 100%.
Okay.
Um, that's where those are the people I stay away from. Um,
Right. I was gonna say that's just disappointing. Like it's just
yeah,
gross. It
it's
feels very unsafe to me.
yeah, and I think that's valid because that feeling of unsafety because it's kind of like and I'm gonna get some hell about this, but I say it all the time on my platform, so you don't give a shit. Um, it's kind of like people that show their child's worst moments. And I've said this before, like you don't have to show their worst moments to connect with another parent. Like everyone's experience and journey is different. But for me, the moment that you mention your child is autistic, I'm like, okay, that's already a club, right? Like there is a club for parents of autistic children.
Right.
Now, your autistic learner could be multiply disabled. Your autistic learner could be more higher support needs than mine. Um, but just the fact of navigating having an autistic child, right, in an ableist society is enough for me to feel some kind of kinship. Now, whether that turns into a friendship is often dependent on your views, your perception, how you view your own child, how do you support them, your willingness to learn. Because, like, I don't know everything either. And it's like,
Right.
and I'm open to listening and learning. And so, but I think absolutely what you're saying, it absolutely went over into the virtual space. And I think it's always like just, and I'm doing my best Lisa here, where you're so like compassionate and understanding of people. And I
Not
feel
always.
like, and I
I
feel like
try, but I fail sometimes.
we all do, but I feel like it makes me think of how, you like looking at this through, and I'm really going to call this the Lisa lens, is like how I'm so starving for community. I'm so starving for understanding that I'm trying to like, this is all that I'm going through. This is all that I'm dealing with. And it's coming out as this competitiveness. And I think about that
Mm.
as like how, when I learned that ADHDers to connect will go, yes, I've experienced the same thing and this is what I experienced. And
Right.
how neurotypically in society, that's in a neuronormative way, that's considered you saying like trying to one up. And it, because it's in trying to change the conversation to you when really you're just trying to demonstrate like, no, that happened to
Right.
me. So
Like I
I
see you.
understand. I
Right.
get
Right.
your pain. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
I think that that absolutely plays out in the virtual space. I think it plays out in content. I think it also gets misconstrued when we look at like misconstrued in the fact of like sometimes, especially in the autism spaces where you have like lower support needs, um, getting more relevance and more acknowledgement than moderate support needs and high
Sure.
support needs,
Sure. Sure.
right? And so I think that that's why we have all these debates and discussions in the disability space too, where, like, well, my child needs this and your child doesn't need that, so you wouldn't understand. And I always talk about how different support needs need different things. And especially in the
Right.
educational setting, that's why I'm very big. Like anyone who's been in my content knows that I always point out that your lower support needs are considered manipulative and your higher support needs, they don't presume competence. And I say that to show that there's always something that is coming from an ableist standpoint.
Right. Just looks different.
For those learners, it just looks different. And so you have different battles. Like my child's getting suspended, your child isn't getting access to grade level content. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah. No, what I'm kind of thinking, because I don't know if I posed my question with the nuance, like where it was in my internal dialogue, but I think that there are through threads, right? Sort of the competition, whose
yeah,
life
yeah,
is
yeah.
harder, is
Hmm.
consistent. I think what is potentially different,
Hmm. Hmm.
and maybe it's not in like real life spaces, is the scrutiny of the like specific child themselves, right? Like I constantly felt like the adults, like my peers, I mean, this is probably true with family as well to a degree, but definitely like parents of other neurodivergent and disabled kids and parents of neurotypical, like it kind of spanned everyone, but it was really more specific to other parents of neurodivergent and disabled kids. And I'm sure it was operating from a place of fear. And there might have even been some jealousy involved in that, right? My daughter's high masking and everything appeared quote unquote fine and like, right? But it felt very personal, like scrutinizing her. Whereas in an online space, I wonder if the neurodivergent and disabled adults feel that personal scrutiny coming at them because they're sharing and exposing their lived experience and having that questioned.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas, not that parents of neurodivergent and disabled kids can't be neurodivergent and disabled themselves, but
Right.
it feels like maybe the scrutiny or the competition or the like whatever the right words are is more around the parenting or the parenting experience. You can
Yeah.
kind of control access to your child in an online space.
Hmm.
Some folks don't. Some folks are real out there with their kids, and both my kids are like, whoa, whoa. But I wonder if that feels maybe a little bit different. And I'm curious if folks are experiencing, I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes, right? Like, but I'm just curious if right, like the space that I hold sort of in community with
Hmm.
parents of neurodivergent and disabled learners is my like the Friday group that you're in.
Right.
And the lived experience is varied, right?
Hmm.
The placements are varied, access to communication is very right.
Right.
And I feel like I am consciously trying
Hmm.
to find the universality in the experiences while
Right. Right.
also allowing space for folks to share and not feel like they have to feel a certain way about couching their personal experience because it's maybe harder to listen to or maybe feels less challenging than, right? Like I feel like that
Yeah.
space
Yeah.
is pretty safe, but I'm
Yes.
wondering if that's not really
Universal.
representative of like what
Uh,
folks are experiencing in real life. I definitely see this dynamic of like the chasm between kind of the actually autistic
hmm.
community and parents and um, lower support needs folks, especially white lower support needs folks, sort of taking up spaces that they shouldn't be, right? Like I see all of those things, but I'm curious about that. Like, I'm going to nitpick your child and scrutinize your child and give you specific feedback about your kid and what your kid is doing or not doing, because that was like my whole time. And every time I'm around,
Hmm.
not everyone, obviously,
Right. Right. Right.
but
Right. Right.
there is a it's like everybody kind of falls back into old tapes and like that's where it goes. It doesn't feel like curiosity and supportive. It feels like judgment and scrutiny and like a calculation that's happening.
I would definitely say I've seen that from schools as an advocate, where, and before my son's diagnosis, there was a perception of just choosing to
Yeah.
do. And so very much became a reflection of his character. I have more so in the virtual space had my parenting attacked
Right.
from an honesty standpoint, like me not knowing my child was autistic. How did you not, like, someone literally was like, how could you not know? Like, what parent does not know their child is autistic?
A
And I
lot.
was like, what?
Yeah.
Like it
Right.
was, and so I definitely think that your generation and that physical presence and that time before social media was so prevalent, I could absolutely see like the scrutinizing the child as in having that more in-person present access. You're still an asshole for doing it, but I could see how that, want to be clear about that, but I could see how just like there was more in-person interaction, and I could see how somebody would feel entitled to compare the disability from that standpoint versus in virtual spaces. I feel like unless you are exposing your child, I don't feel like you get, right? Because in the physical spaces, to be clear, in case anyone's like, well, I wasn't exposed to it. No, you weren't exposing your child. Like in the physical spaces, your children were just around people. Like that's
Right.
what you did.
Right.
The
Right.
virtual
Right.
space, you
Right.
didn't have a choice, right? And so I feel like unless you are exposing your child, you're not getting a lot of that. But at the same time, I have seen where somebody has spoken on their child's needs from that parenting standpoint and the difficulties and the barriers and the hurdles. And then people have in turn like tried to discount that, right? By saying almost like you're identifying them as this, but they really don't seem to have all these issues. And my child has all of these, da, 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 blah,
Right,
blah,
right,
blah.
right, right,
And I
right,
have seen that where I'm like, it's not a competition.
right.
Like
It makes
you're
my skin
competing
crawl.
with
Like I
yourself.
can't be around it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're competing with yourself. I'm like, I'm not, it's not a competition. I'm not here to say my child is more disabled than your child. I am here to say that these are the barriers that my child has faced. These are the barriers that I've faced as a parent. These are the barriers that I have faced as a neurodivergent individual myself. For me, it's not a competition because I don't live your life. And that is what it is. So, and I think it's always very interesting to me too, like when people do try and make things a competition, right? Because I'm always like, there's something within you that you need. Like you need support, you need
Right,
understanding, you need community, you need a village. And so
right,
but by attacking somebody else, that's not going to get you that village and community because you have to hope they in turn that somebody else will see you attacking them and jump on board with that. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like
right, right,
it's
right,
like
right,
that's not the route to take. And I think that many people have do encounter what you're saying. Like I do know people who try and do play groups and stuff because like now we've both had kids and we're in this space and we both have the same age child and the
right,
disability has an impact on the play group's perception of their child and just like,
sure,
oh, your child can't come back, like you can't come back, or like we're now just not
right.
including you in conversations when we're scheduling things. And I do think that is when we do get into that having to set those boundaries of like, what am I looking for my child to engage? Like, I think sometimes when you're very isolated, especially with those friendships pieces, anyone that goes, oh, I have a 2-year-old, you have a 2-year-old, let's hang out.
Right,
Like, oh, yeah. And then, but there's like not a lot of vetting. And then you get there and you realize, oh, we are not on the same page anyway. Like, I also don't maybe agree with how you're parenting your neurotypical child. And it's like, but you are so in disagreement with how I'm parenting my neurodivergent child that now you're setting that tone of like not wanting to hang out. And I think parents have to also look at what are the boundaries I'm setting? Like,
right.
how am I, when I bring my child around, what are my rules that I feel like I have the right to hold this rule because that's me as being their parent and protecting them and keeping them safe. And you don't get to challenge that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel like especially as my kids have gotten older, like I'll see parents of younger children um have experiences out in public, not necessarily with a friend or a family member, but with just somebody in the community, you know, trying to engage in less than stellar ways. Right? Sometimes it is family or friends, right? Like there's a tough moment. And I think a lot of us feel pressure to explain, to give a reason, right? And I've definitely like listened to folks sort of share perspective on what do you say in those moments or how do you explain if your child is having a difficult time or like, and I just remember this was more than a few years ago. My daughter was a teenager, so it was probably like 5 years ago, and we were at a CVS um, waiting for a pickup of some kind, whatever. Maybe was it 5 years? Yeah, because it's 2026. It was during COVID. So I think we were there to get a booster shot. And there was a family across from us with two younger children. And one of the parent as well, but one of the kids was clearly neurodivergent and um, had a device and was on the device and was struggling to sit still. And like, fair enough, you're at the freaking pharmacy having a shot. Like, who the hell wants to be at the damn pharmacy having a shot? But within 2 seconds, the parent, I think, felt the need to like give me the tea. And so she was kind of like making excuses for her child's behavior and communication needs and sensory needs. And like before I knew it, I had this young person's like whole story and right. And I could physically feel without even looking my daughter's entire body like recoil. And I could feel the fear that I was going to say, oh, well, hey, you're not alone, kind of thing, right? And of course, I did not. I just said that I used to be a teacher and I currently worked with teachers and whatever I said, and I didn't touch the other piece. But I don't know if I want to say like my priority, my lens, my something has pivoted as my kids have gotten older. And I would like to acknowledge that there is some privilege wrapped into that because I can be out in public spaces and to the untrained eye, she's going to blend, right? Um, but I do really feel like even for kids where they don't blend, that there's this pressure to explain or to justify, right? Like this is how they communicate. This is the access that they need. This is the sensory tool they need. They need movement. They're going to move. They're going to stim. They're going to this. They're going to that, right? And I think it's layered. I don't think that there's one right answer, right? Like I think in certain situations, disclosing something adds a layer of safety and protection. I think in other situations, it invites judgment and right, like, and so that kind of, as I think you were talking about in the last episode, that cognitive load of that like constant hypervigilance and decision making of like, what do I have to do in this moment? And like my knee jerk reaction now as like a 52-year-old with adult grown children would be to tell somebody to mind their own fucking business and not answer a goddamn thing, right? Like, but and in many ways, like that's the path I take. If somebody comes at me in the ways that don't work for me, I just don't engage. I'm not going to give information about my kid. I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to say something that like is a complete non-answer. I'm going to smile and then if it's somebody I know, I'm going to turn the conversation back to them and ask how they're doing.
Mm.
Right? But I don't know that everybody can do that. And I realize I'm like talking in circles and rambling, but like I feel like
No,
there's this like pressure, right? Like,
yeah. No, you're not at all. You're like, but I think you're getting at when we talk about, navigating those boundaries, but also protecting your child's needs. Like in that story that you just gave, like it was very clear that your daughter was like thinking, "Oh my gosh, like this is a moment where my mom could violate my privacy and share something that I'm not comfortable with her sharing." But also you having that relationship with her and knowing that that is how she would feel, right? And so you were like, no, but you're also mentioned something that's very important when you're looking at trying to find that village or build those relationships and set those boundaries. We often do feel that pressure to like justify not only what our child is doing, but why we're parenting the way we're parenting, right? And you're absolutely right. I feel like as like even for me in my nice young 37 years of age, um I very much early on as a parent was like, fuck it. So and this is like my kid has no diagnosis. I have no diagnosis. Even now, I know like people, I do podcasts. My husband and I have done joint conference presentations together on like how we support
mhm.
our kids and things like that. And I talk to my kids about what I share and what I don't share. Um, I have had moments where I was like, "Oh, this is a great like teaching thing in
Yeah.
how my child handled this." And he was literally like, "You can tell my teachers, but you can't tell everybody else." And I was like, "Okay, noted." And so I do have those conversations with them. And as they get older, it may very well be a dynamic where you see me talk less about them and more
Right.
about the impact of me supporting as a parent. Um, because I'm always going to respect that, right? And so,
Right.
and I think a great example of it is Cheryl Poe, who's an advocate out of Virginia, advocating for Kids Inc. We were just at the Autism and Black conference in April, and she did her presentation, and she has two sons, and she had a picture, and she said, I have two sons. You see a picture of me with one son because he was like, "Yes, I want to be in a picture with you for your presentation." And my other son was like, "Absolutely not." So she was like, "So that's why." And she has that discussion. Cheryl's ADHD and dyslexic. She talks about like her kids and their
Oh,
difference.
I don't know anything
Yes.
about that.
Like, so she's like, but she was like, that's why you only see one of my sons, because she's like, my other son is like, absolutely not. I don't want to be in a picture for your
No,
presentation.
no, no.
Um, and so, but I think sometimes I do feel like that is a uniqueness to neurodivergent parents, even before we even know we're neurodivergent, is that I feel like we take sometimes those considerations that others may not take. And so, but I think you're absolutely right with that, like that boundaries. And again, going back to like protecting your child's needs, is that like sometimes the explanation is like, this is just how I parent my fucking kid. Like, there doesn't need to be an explanation of like my kid is autistic, because it's not your damn business. Like, and like, you know what I mean? And like, I think that's what you're getting at with that piece of like, I think
Right,
we
right.
navigate and learn that of just like, you know what, I don't owe you an explanation. At the end of the day, you're not raising my kid, you're not paying my bills, you're not feeding me. And I won't say the other thing that my dad always says: if somebody's not doing these following things, then their opinion doesn't matter. And I'm pretty sure
He
Lisa
is
knows,
absolutely right.
but it's right. And as I get older, that's really how it goes. And I think that's always stuck with me when it comes to that, is that my parents really did teach me and my sister without using the word boundaries. They taught us how to set up boundaries. And so subsequently, like it just happened to be like I was primed and ready when I ended up having an autistic child and an ADHD child, and finding out I was autistic, of how to implement those boundaries and then spend time socially weeding out um those relationships, I feel. And sometimes those relationships just fell away because I felt like I was exerting a lot of energy and effort and it wasn't being reciprocated. And so then I was like, why am I putting in all this energy and it's not being reciprocated? So I think that that's, when you talk about those boundaries of protecting your child's needs and not that lack of understanding, I think sometimes that comes with that growth and experience of that impact on you and your child.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really interesting you just say that because I think you are wise the way my husband is wise. Um, and the way my daughter is wise, where you're like, until you smell right, you smell wrong. Right? Like, right. Whereas I'm just like, wee, everybody's so great. And then I'm like crashing into the wall, right? Not good. And he's always right. And it pisses me all the way off. He's like, yeah, they're an asshole. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I'm telling you. And then he'll liken it to something that I know is not great. And then I'm like, ah, Aaron. And then however long it takes me to catch up, I'm like, God damn it, why are you always right? Um, but I think it's that pattern recognition that like, been here, done this, right? And my ADHD brain, not that I don't see patterns, but my ADHD brain is just busy like ping ponging around a little bit. I don't catch it as
I
quickly.
think too, like ADHDers being like, because that's why I told my husband, like me being an odd HDer, like I get it, I see it, but with him, I think you all are more open, and I think in that understanding piece of like, okay, maybe it was an off day, maybe you're having a rough day, maybe you're having a rough time, and I feel like autistics are like, yeah, I don't like that. And so I feel like it's like, even if we still will be in the space with you,
If you
we're
have
not
to.
letting you into our space. We can share a space, but I'm not letting you in my space. And I feel
Right.
like ADHDers are more so like, we can share a space and I might let you into my space depending on how this interaction is going. And then odd HDers are like, I don't even want to be in the space with you. But we're gonna have to be in a space, and so I'm just gonna be quiet. And now I seem awkward, and like, and that's what I really think. I really think that's how it cranks out because there's been plenty of times where I'm just like, and we're good at masking. Some of us are good at masking, and so I'm really great about it if I'm like, I don't fuck with you, but like we're in the space together and we have to be in the space together. So I'm not gonna do anything to make myself more uncomfortable because I'm already uncomfortable because I'm in the space with you. You see what I'm saying? I feel like that's how, in case anyone's listening, that's just giving you some insight into you met one autistic, one ADHD, or one odd ADHD, or you've met one. But giving you some insight into how my mind works and how I've had conversations with others and they have the
Right.
same diagnoses that I do.
Right.
And they
Right.
are like, yes, that's exactly it. So just throwing it out there. But I think that that's again that weaves into that boundaries. And I think that though that can also result in isolation, right? Because I'm coming across so many people I feel that way and now I'm isolating and I'm not like my boundary setting has caused me to not have support. So I think it's
Right.
really like a fine line and that's something that my husband and I talk about a lot is like us not I found my core group and he found his core group, but I've had to, as a spouse, moving and him being gone, find another person to add to my core group.
Right.
And that's where he is more so less receptive in that regard to bring someone into the core group. He will talk and facilitate, and you can invite him, place, and he'll go. But that doesn't mean that you're now in the core group. It just
Right.
means,
You're not, you haven't, yeah,
yeah.
you're not in the circle yet. Yeah. No, that is so funny because you just described my husband and my kid. But I think that for myself, you said something about like giving and not having it reciprocated and like hitting a point where you're like, what am I doing? And that's a pattern for sure I see in myself where I will get myself in situations or relationships where I'm doing a lot of the lifting and it it can guise itself as it's reciprocated because there's a lot of contact or there's right. And then at some point I start to notice that that's right. And I'm not a tit for tat. It's got to be even kind of like I don't, it's not that, but like something will happen, something like I'll hit a level of burnout where I don't have the bandwidth.
Mhm.
And then it starts to show itself. And then I get pissed and I'm like, what are we doing here? And why do I keep sort of gravitating towards folks where this is the pattern?
Mhm. It's that mutual beneficial piece, and that's why I really always, again, another tidbit when I'm looking at social stuff. I this year had several times where I had an IEPs, a goal put in regarding healthy and unhealthy relationships,
Yes.
and supporting learners and learning that because there kept being this thing of like they're falling behind the wrong people or they're doing things that bother their peers, and I was like, well, are we teaching them about unhealthy and healthy relationships? Are we teaching them what's a mutually beneficial relationship? Are we teaching them how to have those? And this was with a lot of my middle and high schoolers. And I was like,
Sure.
we're not. And I was like, but now we're blaming them for the behavior.
Right. That part. That part. Yeah, no, this is so fascinating. We could probably keep talking about this for forever. I have no idea how long we've been going, and we kind of went off script. Shocking. But I took us off script with a question.
No, I think, and
But
I
I
think,
go ahead.
we've weaved it all back to though, like again, boundaries and protecting your kids' needs. I think it really goes to, and I have like a little bit of a time frame thought of where we started, so we're in a good place to wrap up.
Oh,
Like,
good.
but it all goes back to you have to know your boundaries and feel comfortable enforcing them. I think as parents of neurodivergent learners and as neurodivergents, we often have people set boundaries with us And the reason why we are offended by that is because their boundaries are set in this like neurotypical, neuronormative view of things and just a social view of things. And it's things that were making us uncomfortable anyway. And I think my biggest thing for families would be when it comes to friends and other family members is set those boundaries for you. Like, no,
Right.
I actually don't want my child around you and your child because of how you aren't sensory friendly and you don't have different ways of communication access and you aren't understanding about free play. And you know what I mean? Like, because they're not doing the things you want them to do, you're not understanding of that. And so for me, I don't want them around that and setting that boundary. And I think
Yeah.
that would be my advice to parents.
Yeah. And I think that just sort of recognizing like the cognitive load of navigating all of these things and being gentle with yourself. Um, because I think all of us have been in situations where we get dysregulated and say or do something that we're like, damn, that's not how I wanted to respond, right? And you're up at 2 in the morning going, this is how I wanted to respond, right? Um, but yeah, just, giving yourself grace, um, and just knowing that the lens shifts over time, right? Like, not that these sort of things don't present themselves in different ways as my kids have gotten older, but I mean, in so many ways, as somebody that's a little bit older in this space, I feel like part of the reason why I asked the question is I feel like to a degree, you guys are doing a better job. And maybe that's my like rose-colored goggles. It seems like it's maybe moving in the right direction, right? It's certainly far
Oh,
from perfect, but maybe the virtual space allows for a boundary that feels safer to set than and less confrontational to set than in real life.
I agree. And I think it has shifted in that there's more conversations, there's more ways to access information. You're not limited to someone else's perception of a situation. You
Right,
are exposed to multiple perceptions. And I think
right,
that's really helped shift as well of like maybe this group isn't for me because I do feel like these parents are not going through the same thing I'm going through, but this group over here is. And so you
right.
have the ability to shift from one space to another without being in a space and disparaging others in that space.
Yeah, yeah, which is great.
Right. Well, that is episode 2. We have 4 more episodes left. We don't know what they're going to be about. We just know the last episode will be about prepping in the summer to head back to school as time flies by. But thank you for listening to our second episode of the summer series. Thank you again for joining us here in the Affirming Village. We're your co-hosts, Dr. Destiny Huff and Lisa Baskin-Wright, and we hope today's conversation leaves you feeling seen, supported, and better equipped to advocate for yourself or your learner. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone else in the village. Until next time, keep advocating, keep affirming, and keep building the village we all deserve.